All right, welcome back. We are here today. We've got another Poetry Pause with Mr. Coby Dolloff, and today joining us as well is Mr. Joshua Dyson. Welcome to both of you.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Good to be back.
Always good to be here. You'll hear potentially some strings in the background today. We're recording during the elective hour for the upper school.
We've actually hired a background. I hope that was an okay allocation of funds from Grant.
It was good
to hire a string quartet.
They're just going to play while So they were playing a second ago. We'll see if they get picked up on the track. But
it sounded good.
Yeah, it is sounding really good. Miss Watson does a great job with them, and our kiddos are doing great. But Coby, who do you have for us today?
So, surprise, surprise for those of you that know me, I've got some GK Chesterton for us. We didn't know how long I could hold off, and it turns out it's the second edition of the podcast. But we're coming up on Christmas, and I think there are a few people who are better at talking about Christmas than Chesterton. And I also think Chesterton is rarely better than when he's talking about Christmas. One of his personal favorite things, and mine as well. So I've got a Chesterton Christmas poem, probably my favorite of several of his. It's called The House of Christmas. I think if you listen to our last Poetry Pause, you'll notice a distinct difference. Chesterton's poetry is much more rhythmic, much more straightforward, sing-songy. I think it's very fitting for writing about Christmas. So I'll hop in, and we can save the analysis for afterwards,
Sweet.
I guess. So here we go. The House of Christmas by G.K. Chesterton. There fared a mother driven forth out of an inn to roam. In the place where she was homeless, all men are at home. The crazy stable close at hand, with shaking timber and shifting sand, grew a stronger thing to abide and stand than the square stones of Rome. For men are homesick in their homes, and strangers under the sun, and they lay their heads in a foreign land whenever the day is done. Here we have battle and blazing eyes, and chance and honor and high surprise, but our homes are under miraculous skies where the Yule tale was begun. A child in a foul stable where the beasts feed and foam. Only where he was homeless are you and I at home. We have hands that fashion and heads that know, but our hearts we lost, how long ago, in a place no chart nor ship can show, under the sky's dome. This world is wild as an old wives' tale, and strange the plain things are. The earth is enough, and the air is enough, for our wonder and our war. But our rest is as far as the fire drake swings, and our peace is put in impossible things, where clashed and thundered unthinkable wings round an incredible star. To an open house in the evening, home shall men come, to an older place than Eden, and a taller town than Rome, to the end of the way of the wandering star, to things that cannot be and that are, to the place where God was homeless and all men are at home.
That's good.
It's good.
House of Christmas by G.K. Chesterton. So obviously you're a huge Chesterton fan. We saw that with the seniors last year as they presented their theses. But in particular, his poetry seems like it has risen as a thing that you enjoy.
Yeah, which is
Why?
interesting because I think it's probably Chesterton is sort of a Renaissance man and does journalism, does poetry, does novels, does theology, does history. And poetry, I think, as far as like what he's actually good at compared to other people, isn't near the top of the list, I wouldn't say. Like, he's for sure a minor poet and is and in a lot of ways, I think it's kind of a one-trick pony. Like, all he can do is like very rhythmic rhyming. And part of that, I think, is because he's not a fan of modernist developments in poetry, but we could get further into that. But I also think that his poetry really gets at the heart of a lot of what he's trying to do in his other works. I think you can't avoid being straightforward in poetry, and Chesterton loves to avoid being straightforward.
Yeah. Talked about that a little bit last time. You have to be really selective with your words.
Yeah.
Because you sometimes need things to mean multiple things.
Yeah, exactly.
Or to elicit some sort of response.
Does this piece remind you of something else that Chesterton has written, another work of his, or one of his books? Or
Yeah, I mean, I think Chesterton is almost everything he does revolves around like a set of like 4 or 5 themes that I could probably go through, and so I think almost everything in some sense seems to connect. But this idea of being at home and finding rest and wonder at the world, that all 3 of those things I feel like are kind of swirling around in this poem. Chesterton's kind of thing that he's known for, his shtick, is wonder at the world and at the everyday, right? And you see that in the second to last paragraph where he says, "This world is as wild as an old wives' tale, and strange the plain things are. The earth is enough and the air is enough for our wonder and our war." He has a essay we read in Integrated Humanities called Tremendous Trifles, where he talks about how, some people would think that you need to go out and travel around the world to see wonders, whereas he says, I'm going to sit and let the wonders wash over me where I'm at. Right, that actually, if I actually looked at that bookshelf, then I could see the wonder in it if I truly saw it for what it was.
reminds me of the Piece of Wild Things.
Yeah,
Right, Wendell Berry.
Yeah.
Definitely. And so
Is that the one where he's like, if I could only come back to England as a...
So
Or
that's
am I mixing.
Well, that's a different essay, but very similar. I mean, again, like I'm saying, right? Like he's doing a lot of these similar things in a lot of his work.
Is that orthodoxy?
Well, he talks about that kind of in orthodoxy. He has a whole essay where he talks about that in his actual home. Like I'm actually going to, he contemplates leaving England and going. And then there's a novel called Man Alive where the main character
that's what it is. Yeah.
literally does that.
Yeah.
Actually goes, it says, I'm going to leave and go around the world until I can actually see my own home as if it was someone else's.
Yeah.
And see it with new eyes. But what's interesting here, I think, is that he usually, I think that's kind of the final note in a lot of his stuff, is he's like, oh, we need to wonder at the world, period. Whereas in this, it's just sort of a comma, right? He's saying like, this world is wild and should cause us wonder, but, and the but is like, but wonder is available to us, right? The strange things are plain, but
Pause for a second. It's that noise.
Oh yeah, I hear it.
Sorry. All right.
So the idea that wonder, right, is that we should wonder at the things around us, the ordinary, right? Strange the plain things are. That's actually just kind of a comma in this poem, because he's saying like, yes, sure, that like wonder is available to us, but our rest, he says, our rest is as far as the fire drake swings, and our peace is put in impossible things. So it's like the one thing we can't grasp at is actually this sense of home and this sense of rest, right? And he's saying that the only place that it actually is available is in this place where paradoxically God himself is homeless and all men are at home, which I think is pretty interesting, and we could dive into a little bit more.
Yeah, no doubt. That's what I was starting to pick up on that theme too, with the for men are homesick in their homes and strangers under the sun, but even the difference there of like, it's not just your house, it's every house, it's everywhere on earth. You are not at home, and there's that longing, you're wanting for something else, wanting to know where you can actually lay your head and be at home.
That's interesting there, close to the top, talking about Mary, right, in the place where she was homeless, all men are at home. What's the contrast there of her homelessness, but does it mean that the men feel at home, or it's just where they reside? What's the contrast there meant to be?
Well, I mean, I think it's talking about the stable, right, where Christ is born. And so, to me, what I see here, obviously, there's some ambiguity here that you could go different directions with, but it seems like he's contrasting the homelessness of Mary and Joseph and the Christ child, who can't even get a room in the inn, with actually then us who feel homeless everywhere in the world, when we actually come to the stable, when we actually come into the presence of Christ, like that's actually where we finally find a real sense of home and real rest, right? Because and I think that's why he references back to Eden too. It's like he says, home shall all men come to, an older place than Eden, in a taller town than Rome. It's like we actually feel homeless everywhere on the earth because we actually have lost our sense of home since the fall, right? But here is dawning the first light of the new creation, right? Where we actually are all finally going to be at home in the presence of God. And so it's like Christmas is this little light shining out of darkness, right? It's this entrance of the kingdom into the earth. It's this little, it's this blip on the map of what everything is someday going to be, right? When God actually does restore all things to right, restore us to relationship with himself. And we finally do feel at home in the new creation. So that, I think that's what's going on.
Yeah, that's so good. So good.
What are the square stones of Rome? I had a hard time trying to think of what is that? The square stones of Rome.
Yeah, that's a good question. It could be that there's a more specific reference than this, but I just thought of it. He seems to me to be using Rome to sort of represent like the height of civilization, right? He refers to it again later in the poem when he says older place than Eden, taller town than Rome. And so I think of it just as, these magnificent architectural feats of the ancients and medievals that you find, that we'll find when we're there in a few months.
Yeah, that's right. 3 months.
Not heaven, Rome.
Yeah.
Could be heaven.
Hey,
Lord willing, Rome.
Lord willing. You never know.
Just didn't want to be confusing.
Yes.
That.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, I imagined that it was something about the sturdiness, like men trusted in the material and the ability and the ability to think and the ability to build and create.
That's good.
And what they should have been looking for was
square,
this manger.
That's good.
I got stuck on square stones. I was like, is something particular about the square stones, or is it just no? They were square stones because that's how you move them. The sun and the sky seem to pop up quite a bit. Mine has no paragraph breaks, but the sun at the beginning, then we're rolling around this we go around an incredible star, Christ, or the sun. The end of the way of the wandering star. Does he have his eyes in the heavens? I mean, is this pretty common for Chesterton to center things around celestial bodies?
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole separate discussion you could get into about like Chesterton and Lewis's like sort of medieval cosmology of the world and how they like sort of think of things a lot differently than we moderns do. Chesterton has a whole essay about how we shouldn't say that the earth revolves around the sun. Because he's like, yes, that might be true in a practical scientific sense, but it's not actually true when it comes to our daily lives, and it's not true in sort of like a spiritual sense. Like we watch the sun rise and fall, and like as it pertains to our lives, that's actually more true than saying we revolve. It's an interesting essay. But him and Lewis a lot of times are looking sort of have the seven heavens idea of the medieval that the medievals have of cosmology, where they are infused with more meaning than sort of just these like mathematical things that we view them as in the modern scientific world. But what I really think is going on here, right, is he's specifically just trying to picture the nativity, right, where. So our rest is as far so this is right after the part we talked about earlier. Strange the plain things are, the earth is enough and the air is enough for our wonder and our war. Like these things are available. But our rest, where is it? Our rest is as far as the fire drake swings, a fire drake being a dragon, right? So he's already he's sort of bringing in this mythological feel to the thing. Our rest is as far as the fire drake swings, and our peace is put in impossible things, right? It's actually unthinkable that the creator of the universe would become a little crying baby and just be laying among the cows and sheep. Our peace is put in impossible things, where clashed and thundered unthinkable wings round an incredible star, right? So I think that's thinking of the angels and the star above the nativity. And so I think he's just trying to he's trying to actually awaken our sense to the wonder of like, this is actually nuts what's going on in the nativity scene.
It makes me think of, we just finished in our house last night, Best Christmas Pageant Ever. Different level of reading, for sure. Have you ever read Best Christmas Pageant Ever?
I don't think I have.
Okay. Have you?
No.
Oh, man, you got to read it with your kids. Everyone should read Best Christmas Pageant Ever. But these kids come into the church, and they're only there because they found out their snacks, and they're kind of like out on the edge of town and ruffians a bit. And when they go to act out the play, and the nativity and all that, they're starting to wonder like why, she's like, well, the main girl is like, I don't even know what the story is. And so the gal starts to retell it, and it's really interesting as you've been talking, because I'm like, oh, all these people started to see for the first time what she only could see because she had never heard it before. I know the Herndon, but I can't remember what the oldest girl's name is. But she's like, so she gets to the part and she's like, oh, and Mary was with child. And everyone's like, yes, with child. And she's like, Mary was pregnant, like this little girl. And this other girl, Alice Wendelkin, gets totally upset because someone would dare to call the mother of Jesus pregnant. No, it's with child. And like how even connecting back to this, like the ordinariness of being pregnant didn't, like, the other girl, Alice Wendelkin, was so offended by trying to make Jesus's mom ordinary. And it's like, no, friends, there was something special about her.
Yeah.
For sure. But she was a young teenage girl who was pregnant and had just traveled so she could be registered and just needed to give birth. Just needed a spot to have the baby.
Yeah.
Sorry, little aside.
No, that's awesome.
The other thing
that's
it made
good.
me think of was Pastor Derek Hale is, I don't know if he's on sabbatical. At some point he's doing a sabbatical, but he's specifically studying how the 7 Chronicles of Narnia relate to the 7 celestial or the 7 heavenly bodies, the 7 different planets of medieval times, and how like in the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, you'll see, I think it's Jupiter, and so everything's more jovial, and you see Santa coming back, or Saint Nick, or Father Christmas, or
So for our listeners out there, if you want to know more about that, talk to Mr. Hale or read. There's 2 books. There's sort of if you're the more academic person, read Planet Narnia by Michael Ward. It's like his 600-page PhD. Or then he has a more popular version for the less academically inclined among us, like myself.
I'll pick up this one.
Like myself. And it's called the Narnia Code. And it's only like 150 or 200 pages.
Oh, nice.
That discusses those kind of ideas. So if it catches your interest. It really is. I think it's convincing that Lewis actually is doing something with it in those books.
That's cool.
Interesting. Josh, what else have you picked up on?
I think we covered a lot of the things here. As I think there's a lot to meditate on here. The last 2 lines in particular, I've just been reflecting on. To the place where God was homeless and all men are at home. Obviously, the home theme is something that we've hit pretty heavily here. But just thinking on the implications of what does it mean for God to be homeless, and what does it mean for all men to be at home in that place. So I don't really have an answer for that, but it's certainly some somewhat what poetry is intended for us to do, is not to necessarily have answers, but to spark some things for us to meditate on. So I'm just kind of meditating on that a little bit.
Cool.
That's good.
Coby, anything else?
Man, I don't know if there's much else I could say that is as good as the poem itself. This has always been one that has struck me as less like, oh, here's my explanation, and more just, I just like sitting under it.
Yeah.
That's good.
That's good. Well, then we'll sit under it for today.
I love that.
Thanks for coming in again.
Yeah, thanks,
for this
Coby.
week's Poetry Pause.